The stars had always seemed so peaceful from Earth, distant points of light, gently twinkling in the vast darkness. For centuries, humanity gazed up at them with wonder, dreaming of what might be out there. We sent our radio signals, our primitive probes, our hopeful messages into the void. And for centuries, we heard nothing in return. Until we did. The first contact was subtle. A signal, detected by our deep space monitoring stations, clearly artificial in origin. It wasn't directed at us. Just the electronic chatter of a civilization going about its business, unaware that others might be listening. The scientific community was ecstatic. Politicians made grand speeches. The public imagination soared with possibilities of benevolent alien mentors, of technological marvels beyond our comprehension. None of us imagined the truth. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Deterrent, gazing out at the sprawling shipyards of Titan. The massive structure of humanity's first true interstellar battleship dominated the view, its hull gleaming under the industrial lights. 2 kilometers of reinforced composite alloys, fusion drives, and enough firepower to level a continent. The culmination of 50 years of human ingenuity and paranoia. Beautiful, isn't she? Admiral Thomas Harrison stepped up beside her, his weathered face reflecting in the viewport glass. "I'm not sure beautiful is the word I'd use, her," Sarah replied. "Terrifying, maybe." Harrison chuckled. "That's rather the point, Captain. The galaxy is a much more crowded place than we ever imagined, and not everyone out there is pleased to see us." Sarah knew that all too well. The initial euphoria of first contact had lasted barely 6 months before the attacks began. Small at first, research outposts on the fringes of our solar system going silent, unmanned probes disappearing. Then came the Ganymede massacre, when an alien vessel obliterated the research colony without warning or provocation. 3,000 lives snuffed out in minutes. We learned later that we had stumbled into a complex web of ancient interstellar politics. To some of the older species, humanity was nothing more than an upstart civilization, a potential threat to be eliminated before we could properly defend ourselves. To others, we were simply irrelevant, collateral damage in conflicts spanning millennia. "The final weapons systems are being installed tomorrow," Harrison continued. "You'll be ready for launch within the week." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The Deterrent wasn't just a ship, it was humanity's statement to the galaxy. We will not go quietly. We will not be exterminated. We have teeth, and we will use them. "The crew?" she asked. "The best Earth has to offer. 500 sailors, soldiers, and scientists, each personally selected by you or me." Among them was Dr. Alex Rivera, the brilliant physicist whose breakthrough in gravitational manipulation had made the ship's main weapon possible, and Lieutenant Commander David Walsh, whose encounter with an alien scout ship near Neptune had left him with burn scars covering half his body, and a determination that matched Sarah's own. "Any word from the diplomatic corps?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Harrison's expression hardened. "Our ambassadors continue to be ignored by the hegemony. The Vrol Dominion has formally rejected our request for protection. The smaller independent worlds are too afraid of reprisal to openly support us. So, we're on our own. As we've always been, Captain." The following days passed in a blur of final preparations. Sarah reviewed crew rosters, inspected weapons systems, and memorized the ship's schematics until she could navigate its corridors blindfolded. The Deterrent wasn't just a battleship, it was a technological marvel, incorporating everything humanity had learned from salvaged alien tech and our own desperate innovations. The night before launch, Sarah couldn't sleep. She found herself in the ship's command center, running simulations on the main tactical display. The holographic projections showed the known reduced to colored boundaries and navigational markers. "Trouble sleeping, Captain?" Dr. Rivera asked as he entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Occupational hazard," Sarah replied, accepting one of the cups gratefully. Alex studied the display. You're reviewing the Orion Arm territories again. The intelligence reports suggest the attacks on our outposts originated from somewhere in this sector. She gestured to a cluster of stars near the boundary of what the aliens called protected space. And you intend to find them. It wasn't a question. I intend to show them that humanity is not prey, Sarah said quietly. That we can and will defend ourselves, even if we're outnumbered and outgunned, Alex asked. Especially then. Sarah took a sip of her coffee. History is full of underdogs who changed everything. Besides, the deterrent has a few surprises they won't be expecting. The launch ceremony the next morning was brief. No grand speeches, no cheering crowds. Those would have been for a vessel of exploration or diplomacy. The deterrent slipped its moorings with minimal fanfare, its massive engines gradually building power as it moved beyond Saturn's orbit. For 3 days they traveled in silence, pushing the new engines to their limits as they approached the heliopause, the boundary where our sun's influence faded and true interstellar space began. It was here, beyond the protection of our home system, that humanity had suffered its worst defeats. It was here that the deterrent would make its stand. Sensor contact, Lieutenant Park announced from her station. 3 vessels, bearing 047 Mark 023. Configuration matches the ships that attacked Europa Station. Sarah felt the command center grow still, every crew member turning to look at her. This wasn't a drill or a simulation anymore. This was what the deterrent had been built for. Battle stations, she ordered, her voice calm despite the pounding of her heart. Bring all weapons systems online. Communications, prepare to broadcast on all frequencies. As klaxons sounded throughout the ship, Sarah stood from her captain's chair and straightened her uniform. The tactical display showed the alien vessels adjusting course, clearly aware of the deterrent's presence. They were moving into an attack formation, confident in their technological superiority, expecting another easy victory against the primitive humans. They had no idea what was coming. Message ready, Captain, the communications officer reported. Sarah nodded. Put me through. She took a deep breath, thinking of Ganymede, of Europa, of all the human lives already lost to alien aggression. When she spoke, her voice carried the determination of her entire species. Attention, unidentified vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Deterrent. You have entered human territory and are approaching with hostile intent. Be advised, we are not the defenseless prey you've encountered before. Turn back now or discover exactly what humanity is capable of when threatened. On the display, the alien ships continued their approach, accelerating. Sarah's lips curved into a grim smile. As expected, weapons control, target the lead vessel. Let's show them why this ship is called the Deterrent. As the massive main cannon began to charge, sending vibrations through the deck plates beneath her feet, Sarah whispered words meant only for herself and her crew. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for Earth, for everyone and everything we've ever known. Today, we teach the galaxy that humanity will not go quietly into the night. The weapon fired, and everything changed. A blinding flash erupted from the Deterrent's prow, the gravitational lance carving through space like a surgeon's scalpel. The beam struck the lead alien vessel, not with explosive force, but with something far more devastating, a localized distortion in space-time itself that compressed a portion of the ship's hull to the thickness of an atom. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the alien ship listed to one side. Atmosphere venting from the perfect circular hole punched through its armor. Not destroyed, but barely above a whisper. Target's propulsion systems are failing. Sarah nodded, feeling no satisfaction, only grim resolve. Target the second vessel. Same intensity. As the main cannon began to recharge, the remaining alien ships broke formation, splitting in opposite directions. Their confusion was evident in their erratic movement patterns. They hadn't expected resistance, let alone technology that could penetrate their advanced shielding. They're transmitting something. Communications Officer Raj Patel reported. I think it's a distress call. Let them call for help. Sarah replied. I want the galaxy to see what happens when they threaten Earth. The gravitational lance fired again, catching the second vessel as it attempted to maneuver away. This time, the alien ship's reactor must have been hit. A blue-white explosion blossomed in the darkness, leaving nothing but scattered debris. The third vessel accelerated to what their intelligence suggested was maximum speed, clearly abandoning its companions in favor of delivering a warning to whoever had sent them. Captain, should we pursue? Lieutenant Commander Walsh asked from the tactical station, the scared half of his face tightening with barely contained rage. Walsh had lost his entire family in the Europa attack. Sarah studied the tactical display for a long moment. No, let it go. She could feel the surprise ripple through the bridge crew. Walsh's expression hardened. Sir, with respect, they've seen what we can do, Commander, Sarah interrupted calmly. Now I want them to tell others. Fear is a weapon too. Dr. Rivera stepped forward from his observer position at the back of the bridge. Captain, we should examine the disabled vessel. The technology alone would be invaluable, and we might gather intelligence on who sent them. Sarah nodded. Prepare a boarding team, full containment protocols, and keep the lance charged. If that ship makes any move we don't like, I want to be ready to finish it. As the crew sprang into action, Sarah felt a moment of vertigo that had nothing to do with the ship's artificial gravity. They had just announced humanity's presence on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. There would be consequences, perhaps severe ones, but they had also shown that Earth would not be an easy target. The boarding team, led by Chief Security Officer Lina Nazari, reported in from the shuttle bay. Ready to deploy, Captain. We have 12 Marines and 3 science specialists. Proceed with caution, Chief, Sarah cautioned. We don't know what might be waiting for you over there. As the boarding shuttle detached from the deterrent, Sarah turned to her first officer. Commander Taylor, you have the bridge. I'll be in my ready room reviewing our next move. The small office adjacent to the bridge offered a moment of silence. Sarah pulled up the star charts they had compiled from various sources, some purchased at exorbitant prices from neutral trading species, others extracted from the data cores of attacking vessels. Somewhere out there was the power behind these attacks, the civilization that had decided humanity was better eliminated than engaged with. Soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Enter. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the communication screen. The quantum entanglement link to Earth headquarters provided instantaneous communication across the vast distance. We've received your action report, Captain, Harrison said without preamble. The Joint Chiefs are impressed, but concerned about the response. Sarah finished for him. Harrison's lips tightened. This was always the gamble. Show too much strength, and we might provoke a full-scale response before we're ready. Show too little, and we continue to be picked off one outpost at a time. The middle path wasn't working, Admiral. We needed to make a statement. Agreed. And now that you have, we need to capitalize on it. The Admiral leaned closer to the camera. Our diplomatic corps is already reaching out to the neutral systems with news of the engagement. Some of the smaller powers that dismissed us before might reconsider their position now. Leverage. What are my orders? Continue your patrol of the outer colonies. The deterrent was built to be seen. Make sure every civilization in the sector knows we can defend ourselves. The communication panel chimed again. An incoming message from the boarding team. I have to go, Admiral. The boarding party is reporting in. Harrison nodded. Good hunting, Captain. Earth stands with you. Sarah switched channels. Chen here. Report, Chief Nazari. The security officer's voice came through clearly, but with an undercurrent of tension that immediately put Sarah on alert. Captain, you need to see this. We've accessed what appears to be their command center. There are bodies, but they're not what we expected. Explain. The crew, sir, they're not a species we've encountered before, and according to Dr. Kavita, they show signs of genetic modification. Extensive modification. Sarah frowned. Send visual. The screen flickered, showing the interior of the alien vessel. The architecture was angular, utilitarian, with none of the flowing organic designs they'd seen from other species. The bodies scattered across what appeared to be a bridge were humanoid, but with gray skin that had an almost artificial sheen to it. Their faces were smooth, with minimal features, just small indentations where eyes should be, no visible nose, and thin slits for mouths. What am I looking at? Chief Dr. Kavita appeared in the frame, her environmental suit obscuring her face, but not the excitement in her voice. Captain, preliminary scans indicate these beings are clones, engineered for space combat. But here's the incredible part. Their base genetic structure shows markers consistent with human DNA. Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. That's impossible. We've barely left our solar system. I need to run more tests. Kavita acknowledged. But I'm certain of the markers. Captain, someone has been using human genetic material to create soldiers. And based on the age of some of the technology we're seeing, they've been doing it for a very long time. The implications were staggering. If someone had been harvesting human DNA, it meant Earth had been visited long before we developed space travel, perhaps for centuries. The attacks weren't random. They were targeted, specific. But why? Captain, Lieutenant Park's urgent voice came over the intercom. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple warp signatures. 7 vessels, approaching fast from the direction the escape ship fled. Sarah straightened. Recall the boarding team. Download whatever you can from their systems in the next 10 minutes, then get back to the deterrent. Understood, Captain. Sarah returned to the bridge, where the tactical display now showed the approaching vessels. These were different from the patrol ships they had engaged, larger, with configurations that suggested dedicated warships. Time to intercept, she asked. 23 minutes at current speed, Park replied. Commander Taylor looked up from his station. Captain, based on their energy signatures, these ships outclass the deterrent in every category. Even with our lance, I don't think we can take on all 7. Sarah studied the display, mind racing through options. This wasn't a skirmish anymore. This was the response she had provoked, come faster than expected. The deterrent was revolutionary, but it was still 1 ship against 7. Prepare to send all data gathered from the enemy vessel to Earth Command, she ordered. Then set course for the Hades Nebula, full speed. The massive gas cloud would interfere with sensors and might give them a fighting chance to evade, or at least choose the battlefield. It was risky. Navigation would be nearly blind, but staying to fight was suicide. As the deterrent's engines roared to life, Sarah returned to her captain's chair. The mystery of the human-derived clones would have to wait. First, they had to survive. Captain, Communications Officer Patel said suddenly, "We're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel." He paused, surprise evident in his voice. "It's in English." Sarah felt the eyes of the entire bridge crew on her. "Put it through." Yet carrying an artificial undertone that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "UES Deterrent. This is Admiral Vanish of the Progenitor Defense Fleet. Your actions constitute an act of war against the Dominion. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Further resistance will result in your complete destruction." Sarah exchanged glances with Commander Taylor. The voice spoke perfect English, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Something almost archaic, like hearing a recording from centuries past. "Open channel," she ordered, keeping her voice steady. "This is Captain Chen of the Earth vessel Deterrent. We engaged your ships in self-defense after numerous unprovoked attacks on human outposts. If you wish to discuss terms, we are prepared to negotiate, but we will not surrender this vessel." A pause followed, long enough that Sarah wondered if the transmission had failed. When the voice returned, it carried a note of what sounded almost like amusement. "There is nothing to negotiate, Captain. You possess technology that does not belong to you. Your species has developed beyond its containment parameters. The anomaly must be corrected." The transmission cut off abruptly. "Containment parameters," Dr. Rivera muttered from behind her. "They're talking about us like we're some kind of experiment." Sarah's mind raced. The human DNA in the clone soldiers. The perfect English. The reference to technologies that don't belong to us. A horrible suspicion began to take shape. "Maximum speed to the Hades Nebula," she ordered. "And get me everything we downloaded from that ship. I need to know who these progenitors are and what they want with Earth." The deterrent surged forward, its revolutionary engines pushing it to speeds that would have been impossible for human vessels just a decade earlier. Behind them, the 7 warships adjusted course in perfect formation, gaining steadily. In the ship's lab, Dr. Kavita worked feverishly to analyze the genetic samples and data they'd retrieved. Sarah joined her there, along with Dr. Rivera and Commander Walsh. The scientist's dark eyes were wide with a mixture of excitement and horror as she pointed to her findings. "The evidence is undeniable, Captain. These clones were created using a baseline genetic template that matches Homo sapiens, but with significant modifications for space adaptation. Resistance to radiation, enhanced muscle density and low gravity, improved oxygen efficiency." She pulled up another display. "And according to the partial ship logs we downloaded, these progenitors have been monitoring Earth for at least 15,000 years. Walsh slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the lab. "So what are they saying? That they created us? That we're some kind of science project they decided to shut down?" "It would explain why they speak our language," Rivera said quietly, "and why they consider our technological development to be their business." Sarah stared at the data scrolling across the screens. Humanity had always wondered if we were alone in the universe. We had imagined first contact scenarios ranging from peaceful cultural exchange to violent invasion. But no one had considered this possibility, that we might be someone else's experiment, a controlled population now breaking free of our test tube. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "Whatever they claim, whatever they believe, Earth is ours, our home, our future, and we will defend it." She turned to Kavita. "Is there anything in the data that might help us against their ships?" The scientist hesitated. "Possibly. Their vessels use a propulsion system similar to our experimental fold drives, but more refined. And there are references to a network of some kind, a faster-than-light communication system that coordinates their fleet movements. Could we disrupt it? Theoretically, yes. But we'd need to get close enough to their command ship to analyze the signal frequency." Sarah nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." The plan came together in hurried meetings as the deterrent raced toward the nebula, the pursuing fleet closing the gap hour by hour. The massive cloud of It would be a dangerous gamble, but their only option against such overwhelming force. "We'll need to modify the gravitational lance," Rivera explained to the gathered senior officers. "Instead of focusing it as a weapon, we spread the effect to create a space-time distortion large enough to mask our position. Essentially, we bend light around us." "A cloaking device," Commander Taylor said, raising an eyebrow. "Can we still fire weapons while it's active?" "No, and it will strain our power systems to the breaking point. We might get 30 minutes before we have to shut it down, or risk a core breach." Sarah studied the tactical projections. 30 minutes to get close enough to their command vessel, analyze their communication network, and find a way to disrupt it. "And if we fail, we won't get a second chance," Walsh finished grimly. As they approached the nebula's outer boundary, Sarah returned to the bridge. The massive cloud loomed ahead, a swirling mass of purple and crimson illuminated by the radiation of newborn stars within. Behind them, the progenitor fleet had split into a search pattern, clearly anticipating their strategy. "They've done this before," Sarah realized aloud. hunted down other experiments that got out of hand. Commander Taylor nodded. But they've never hunted the deterrent before. The ship plunged into the nebula, instantly surrounded by swirling gases that reduced visibility to near zero. The sensors struggled to penetrate the cosmic fog, providing only ghostly outlines of the massive structures within, protoplanetary disks, stellar nurseries, and the dense knots of matter that would someday become new solar systems. Begin emission control protocols, Sarah ordered. Passive sensors only. Let them think we're running blind. In truth, they had one advantage the progenitors couldn't know about. Dr. Rivera's team had developed experimental quantum resonance scanners that could detect the minute gravitational fluctuations of large vessels, even through the nebula's interference. The technology was new, untested in combat conditions, but it was their best hope for navigating the chaos around them. Hours passed in tense silence as the deterrent slipped deeper into the nebula, its course taking it through ever denser regions where the dust and gas blocked even visible light. The pursuing ships followed, their superior sensors allowing them to maintain the search pattern despite the interference. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching the enemy vessels methodically quarter the nebula. "They're thorough," she murmured, "and patient. Captain," Lieutenant Park called suddenly. "Quantum scanner is detecting a massive structure at coordinates 227 Mark 043. It's stationary." The display shifted, showing a ghostly outline of what appeared to be a space station, easily 10 times the size of the deterrent. The design was similar to the progenitor ships, all angular efficiency, but on a scale that suggested it hadn't been built for travel. "A forward operating base," Commander Walsh suggested, "or a research facility." Sarah stared at the image, an idea forming, or a command and control center for their operations in this sector. She turned to communications. "Any transmissions coming from that station?" Patel nodded slowly. "Yes, Captain. Heavy data traffic, encrypted. It matches patterns from the pursuing fleet's communications. That's our target," Sarah decided. "If they've established a base here, it means this sector is important to them, and it's likely controlling the communication network Kavita found referenced in their data." The plan shifted, becoming both simpler and more daring. Instead of trying to analyze the progenitor flagship, they would strike directly at what appeared to be the local hub of their operations, one decisive blow that might throw their entire fleet into disarray. As they cautiously approached the station, keeping to the densest parts of the nebula for cover, Chief Engineer Takashi reported from engineering. "Captain, the gravitational lance modifications are complete, but I must emphasize the risks. Using it, as Dr. Rivera suggests, will push our systems damage the main power grid permanently." "Understood, Chief. Stand by." Sarah turned to the tactical station. "Distance to target, 30,000 kilometers and closing," Walsh reported. "We'll be within optimal range in 17 minutes. On the main view screen, the station grew more defined as they approached. A massive hexagonal structure with what appeared to be docking arms extending from its central hub. Several progenitor vessels were visible in the docking bays, undergoing repairs or resupply. "They're not expecting an attack here," Sarah realized. "This deep in their territory, with their fleet between us and escape. They think they're safe." The communication panel chimed. "Captain, we're receiving a general broadcast from the station," Paddle reported. "It's being transmitted to all progenitor vessels in the sector." "Let's hear it." The same voice as before filled the bridge, speaking with absolute authority. "Attention all units. The rogue experiment vessel has been tracked to Sector 7 of the nebula. Converge and eliminate. No salvage priority. Repeat, complete destruction authorized." Sarah felt a cold clarity settle over her. Experiment. That's all humanity was to them, a test subject that had outlived its usefulness. "Battle stations," she ordered quietly. "Prepare the gravitational lance for wide-field discharge. Target the center of that station." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, the tension on the bridge palpable but controlled. The deterrent slipped closer to its target, still undetected amongst the swirling gases and radiation that filled the nebula. "Engineering reports, Lance charged and ready," Taylor announced. "Awaiting your command." Sarah stood from her captain's chair, facing the view screen and the progenitor station that represented everything humanity was fighting against: arrogance, control, the dismissal of their very right to exist freely. "This is for Earth," she said softly, "and for every species they've ever treated as disposable." She raised her hand, about to give the order that would change the course of the conflict forever, when Lieutenant Park called out in alarm. "Captain, emergency alert from the quantum scanner. Multiple vessels converging on our position. They've found us." The tactical display erupted with new contacts, not just the 7 warships that had been pursuing them, but at least a dozen more, emerging from hidden positions throughout the nebula. They had sailed directly into a trap. Admiral Vanish's voice returned, now tinged with what sounded unmistakably like satisfaction. "Did you truly believe your primitive adaptation of our technology could hide you from us, Captain Chen? We designed your species. We know exactly how you think." Sarah's mind raced, searching for options as the enemy vessels tightened their circle around the deterrent. The gravitational lance was ready, but firing it would leave them defenseless in the aftermath. The station remained their primary target, but reaching it now seemed impossible. Unless, "Dr. Rivera," she called, "what would happen if we inverted the lance's field while charging it to maximum capacity?" The physicist's eyes widened as he calculated the possibilities. A cascading gravitational wave. It would create a temporary singularity, essentially a miniature black hole that would collapse almost instantly. The energy release would be catastrophic. "For them, or for us," Rivera met her gaze steadily. "Both, Captain. We'd be at the center of a shockwave that nothing in this nebula could survive." Commander Taylor stepped closer. "Captain, that would be suicide." "Perhaps," Sarah acknowledged. "But it would also be the end of their command center and a significant portion of their fleet." She looked around at her crew, seeing the understanding in their eyes. "And Earth would know exactly what they're facing." As the progenitor ships closed in from all sides, weapons charging, Sarah made her decision. "All power to the gravitational lance. Prepare for inverted discharge on my mark." The ship hummed with building energy as the lance drew power from every system. Around them, the enemy vessels moved into fire. Sarah opened a channel to all decks. "This is your captain speaking. You all knew the risks when we embarked on this mission. Today, we face a choice between surrender and sacrifice. I choose to fight, not just for our lives, but for the future of our entire species. For Earth." The response came from every section of the ship: engineering, medical, security, science, a chorus of voices unified in purpose despite the fear they all must have felt. The deterrent had been built for this moment, and so had its crew. Dr. Rivera's voice cut through the others as the lance's power levels approached critical. "Field inversion ready, Captain. Awaiting your command." Sarah took one last look at the view screen, at the progenitor station that represented thousands of years of manipulation and control over countless species. Whatever happened next, humanity would never be anyone's experiment again. She drew a deep breath and raised her hand. Sarah's hand hung in the air, seconds from giving the command that would end everything. The progenitor station, the surrounding fleet, the deterrent, and every soul aboard her. A sacrifice that might give Earth a fighting chance against an enemy far more ancient and powerful than anyone had imagined. "Captain." Lieutenant Park's voice cut through the tension. New contact emerging from the far side of the nebula. Sarah's eyes snapped to the tactical display. "Progenitor reinforcements. Negative. Configuration is unknown." Park's fingers flew across her console. "It's massive, Captain. At least 3 times the size of the deterrent." The bridge crew watched as a colossal vessel emerged from the densest part of the nebula, its design unlike anything they had encountered before. Where progenitor ships were all harsh angles and utilitarian efficiency, this vessel flowed like liquid metal, its hull shimmering with an iridescence that somehow penetrated even the nebula's interference. "Weapons charge detected," Walsh reported, his voice tight. "Whatever it is, it's powering up." Sarah's mind raced. A new player in this deadly game, or perhaps some ancient defense system triggered by their presence. Either way, they were now caught between this new threat and the progenitor fleet closing in around them. "They're firing," Park shouted. A pulse of energy, not beam, not missile, but something that bent the light of the nebula around it, lanced out from the unknown vessel. Sarah braced for impact, but the strange weapon wasn't aimed at the deterrent. Instead, it struck the nearest progenitor warship, which simply disappeared. No explosion, no debris. One moment it existed, the next it was gone, leaving only a faint ripple in the nebula gases where it had been. "What the hell was that?" Taylor breathed. Before anyone could respond, the unknown vessel fired again, and again, each pulse removing another progenitor ship from existence. The remaining enemy vessels broke formation, clearly as surprised by this intervention as the deterrent's crew. "Captain," Communications Officer Patel called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. Audio only." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge, deep, resonant with a melodic quality that made it difficult to tell if it was male or female. But most surprising was the language. "UES deterrent, hold your position. We are clearing your escape vector. Prepare to follow our jump coordinates once the immediate threat is neutralized." English again. Perfect, unaccented English. "This is Captain Chen." Sarah responded cautiously. "We appreciate the assistance, but who are you? What stake do you have in this conflict?" A pause, then. "We are the Reclamation. And like you, Captain, we were once their experiments. Around them." The tide of battle had shifted dramatically. The progenitor fleet was in disarray, vessels attempting to regroup or flee as the unknown ship, the Reclamation, methodically eliminated any that came within range of its weapons. "Disengage lance inversion," Sarah ordered quickly. "Maintain standard combat readiness. Let's see how this plays out before we commit to mutual destruction." Dr. The deadly buildup of energy in the deterrent's main weapon gradually stabilized, returning to normal parameters. "The progenitor station is powering up some kind of defensive system," Walsh reported, "and their remaining ships are forming a protective screen around it." On the view screen, the station was now surrounded by a shimmering barrier of energy, while the surviving warships took up positions in a defensive formation. Whatever the reclamation vessel was, the progenitors clearly considered it a serious threat. "Captain," the melodic voice returned, "we are transmitting jump coordinates to your navigation system. We strongly recommend immediate withdrawal. What follows is not something your vessel is equipped to survive." Sarah glanced at Patel, who nodded confirmation of the incoming data. "Coordinates received, Captain. They appear to lead to an empty sector about 3 light years from here." "And why should we trust you?" Sarah asked the unknown allies. "Because we have been fighting this war for 7,000 of your years, Captain Chen. Because, like humanity, we were created by the progenitors and then marked for extermination when we grew beyond their expectations." The voice hardened slightly. "And because in approximately 3 minutes, this entire nebula will become uninhabitable when we deploy our full arsenal against that station." Sarah made her decision. "Navigation. Plot a course using their coordinates. Chief Takashi, I need maximum output from the engines." "Captain," Taylor said quietly, "this could still be a trap." "It could," she acknowledged. "But right now, they're offering us a chance to bring this ship and its data back to Earth. That's worth the risk." She turned to communications. "Inform our new friends that we're withdrawing. But make it clear, we expect answers once we're clear." The deterrent's engines flared to life, pushing the massive battleship through the swirling gases of the nebula. Behind them, the battle between the reclamation vessel and the remaining progenitor forces intensified, energy weapons carving bright paths through the cosmic fog. They were nearly at the nebula's boundary when Dr. Rivera called out from his science station. "Captain, I'm detecting an enormous energy buildup from the reclamation ship. Whatever weapon they're charging, it's beyond anything in our theoretical models. Time to exit the nebula. 45 seconds at current speed," navigation reported. Sarah nodded. "Push the engines past safety limits. I want us clear before whatever's about to happen happens." The ship shuddered as Chief Takashi coaxed more power from the engines, the hull groaning under the strain. The view screen showed the nebula's gases thinning as they approached its outer boundary, the darkness of open space visible beyond. 30 seconds to clear space, navigation announced. Energy levels from the reclamation ship continuing to rise, Rivera reported, his voice tense. "Captain, these readings suggest they're initiating some kind of chain reaction within the nebula itself." "Weapon, charging complete," Walsh added. "They're firing." The deterrent burst from the nebula's outer boundary, just as a blinding flash erupted behind them. So intense that even the ship's automatic filters couldn't fully compensate. The view screen went white, then gradually cleared to show the impossible. The entire nebula collapsing in on itself, gases and dust, and newborn stars all being drawn toward a central point where the progenitor station had been. "My God," Taylor whispered. "They've created an artificial black hole." The sensors confirmed it, a gravitational singularity where the station had been, pulling in everything within its reach. The progenitor fleet, the reclamation ship, the entire nebula itself, all disappearing into that hungry void. "Cool, they have escaped?" Sarah asked, watching the destruction in stunned amazement. Rivera shook his head slowly. "I don't see how. The gravitational forces would tear any ship apart long before it could reach safe distance." Sarah stared at the screen, conflicted. These unknown allies had sacrificed themselves to destroy the progenitor base. "Captain," Patel called, surprise evident in his voice. "We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the coordinates they gave us. Put it through." The melodic voice returned, now tinged with what sounded like satisfaction. "UES deterrent. We confirm successful deployment of the gravity bomb. Progenitor presence in this sector has been eliminated." Sarah leaned forward. "But how did you survive?" "Our sensors showed your ship being drawn into the singularity." A soft sound that might have been laughter. "The vessel you observed was merely a weapon platform, Captain. Our true ship awaits at the coordinates we provided. We look forward to your arrival. There is much to discuss about our common enemy and our common origin." As the transmission ended, a stunned silence fell over the bridge. Sarah slowly returned to her captain's chair, mind racing with implications. The progenitors had created humanity as an experiment, and apparently they had done the same with other species, at least one of which had not only survived extinction, but had developed technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. "Set course for the rendezvous coordinates," she ordered finally, "and prepare a full data package for transmission to Earth Command. They need to know everything that's happened here." As the deterrent's navigation system calculated the jump to their mysterious allies' location, Dr. Kavita arrived on the bridge, her expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Captain, I've completed analysis of the remaining data from the progenitor vessel. I think I know why they consider humanity a threat." She held up a data pad. "The genetic modifications they made to create their clone soldiers. They're almost identical to natural mutations that have begun appearing in the human genome over the past century." Sarah frowned. "What are you saying?" "We're evolving, Captain. Naturally developing the same adaptations they engineered. But in our case, it's happening across the entire species, not just in controlled specimens." Kavita's eyes shone with the implications. Whatever they designed us to be or become, we're doing it on our own, faster than they anticipated. That's why they want us eliminated." Commander Walsh leaned forward. "So we're not just an experiment that got out of hand. We're an experiment that succeeded too well. It would explain why these reclamation people are interested in us," Taylor added. "If they went through something similar." The navigation system chimed, indicating the jump calculations were complete. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing in their faces the same determination that burned within her. They had set out to demonstrate humanity's resolve to defend itself. Instead, they had discovered that the galaxy was far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone on Earth had imagined. "Whatever we're about to learn," she said quietly, "it changes everything. Not just for the deterrent, but for our entire species." She gave the order, and the massive battleship vanished into folded space, leaving behind the collapsing remnants of the nebula and the remains of humanity's first major victory against the progenitors. Unknown to them, across the vast distances of space, other eyes had been watching the confrontation, ancient eyes belonging to powers that made even the progenitors seem young. And they had taken note of the humans and their unexpected allies. The game was changing. New pieces were moving onto the board, and Earth's role in the galactic balance had suddenly become far more significant than anyone could have predicted. The deterrent emerged from folded space at the provided coordinates, the massive ship's systems recalibrating after the jump. On the main view screen, a sight unlike anything the crew had seen before materialized before them. It wasn't just a ship, it was an entire mobile habitat, a construct so vast that it dwarfed even the progenitor station they had left behind. Scanners estimated it roughly 20 kilometers in diameter, Park reported, her voice barely above a whisper. Structure appears to be composed of multiple interconnected modules surrounding a central core. Millions, Captain. Various species, most unknown to our databases. Before Sarah could respond, a transmission came through. UES Deterrent, you are cleared for approach. Please follow the guidance beacons to Docking Bay 17. Small lights illuminated along the construct's surface, creating a path toward what appeared to be a massive opening in its outer hull. Sarah hesitated, then gave the order to proceed. They had come too far to turn back now. As the deterrent approached the docking bay, details of the enormous structure became clearer. What had initially appeared to be a uniform surface was actually teeming with activity. Smaller vessels moving in complex patterns, external habitats connected by impossibly thin bridges, and vast arrays of what looked like energy collection systems extending outward like the petals of a flower. "It's a city," Commander Taylor realized aloud. "A mobile city in space." The docking procedure went smoothly, guided by the unknown ally systems. As the final connections were secured, Sarah assembled a delegation to meet their hosts. Herself, Commander Taylor, Dr. Rivera, Dr. Kavita, and Chief Security Officer Nazari with 2 of her officers. "The rest of you maintain battle readiness," Sarah instructed as they prepared to disembark. "If anything goes wrong, your primary mission is to get the deterrent and its data back to Earth, regardless of what happens to us." The airlock cycled, and Sarah led her team through the connection tube into the alien structure. They were met by a reception party unlike anything they could have imagined. 3 distinct species stood before them, arranged in what appeared to be a ceremonial formation. The central figure stepped forward, humanoid but distinctly non-human, with skin the color of burnished copper and 4 arms that moved with fluid grace. Its eyes were large, entirely black, and seemed to reflect the light in complex patterns. "Captain Chen," it spoke in that same melodic voice they had heard earlier. "I am Sentinel Vashti of the Reclamation Collective. Welcome to the Sanctuary." Sarah stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, I thank you for your assistance, but I think you owe us some explanations." Vashti inclined its head. "Indeed we do. Please, follow me to the council chamber. What you are about to learn will change your understanding of not just the progenitors, but of your own species' origin and purpose. They were led through corridors that seemed impossibly large, encountering dozens of different alien species along the way. Some appeared vaguely humanoid. Others were so foreign in design that Sarah's mind struggled to categorize them. What they all shared was a sense of purpose, and when they looked at the human delegation, something that seemed almost like recognition. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater with 7 representatives seated at its center, each from a different species, including Vashti. As Sarah and her team were directed to seats of honor, a holographic display activated above the central platform, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Captain Chen began a being that appeared to be composed of crystalline structures arranged in a roughly humanoid shape, its voice translated through some unknown technology. "What do you know of the Great Cycle?" Sarah glanced at her officers before responding. "Nothing." "What is it?" The crystalline being, introduced as Elder Kizit of the Luminary, gestured, and the galactic map zoomed in on a particular spiral arm. "For nearly 1 million of your years, the entities you know as progenitors have been seeding worlds across this section of the galaxy with engineered life forms. Your species, like all of ours, were created by them." "But why?" Dr. Kavita asked, leaning forward. "What purpose does it serve?" Vashti answered, "They are not creators. They are farmers. The progenitors seed worlds with intelligent life, guide their development through subtle intervention, and then harvest them once they reach a certain technological threshold." "Harvest." Commander Taylor's voice was sharp with alarm. "Harvest what?" "Potential," answered another council member. "Potential for dimensional manipulation that develops in sufficiently advanced consciousness." Dr. Rivera's eyes widened. "You're talking about psychic abilities, ESP, things most humans consider pseudoscience. More accurately, we speak of the quantum entanglement properties of consciousness itself," Elder Kizit corrected. "When a species reaches a certain developmental stage, their minds begin to interact with reality in ways that transcend conventional physics. This energy can be harvested, and the progenitors have built their entire civilization upon extracting it from mature species." Sarah felt a chill run through her. "And this has happened before. To other worlds." "Thousands," Vashti confirmed grimly. "Each of our species represents a harvest that failed, or rather, a harvest that was prevented. We are the survivors, those who escaped extinction by fleeing or hiding. For 7,000 years, we have been gathering our strength, rescuing other targeted species when possible, and developing technologies to fight back." The holographic display shifted, showing various worlds, some thriving with civilization, others barren and lifeless. The progenitor's pattern is consistent. They allow a species to develop until the quantum potential begins to manifest. Then they trigger an extinction event and harvest the resulting energy surge. "And humanity has reached this point?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Vashti confirmed. "The genetic adaptations your scientists discovered are markers of this development. Humanity is on the cusp of a quantum consciousness breakthrough, one that would make your species an irresistible target for harvesting." Dr. Kavita leaned forward. "But if that's true, why attack our outposts? Why not just trigger some catastrophe on Earth itself?" "Because your species did something unexpected," answered Elder Kizit. "You developed the gravitational lance technology." Dr. Rivera's expression changed to one of shock. "The lance? But that was developed from first principles of physics. There was no alien influence." "Not directly," Vashti agreed. "But the principles behind it are the same ones that allow consciousness to manipulate space-time at a quantum level. By developing the technology externally, you demonstrated that humanity was already beginning to harness the very energy the progenitors seek to harvest." Suddenly, the pieces fell into place for Sarah. "So the attacks on our outposts were attempts to eliminate your technological development before it could be weaponized against them," Vashti confirmed. "The progenitors feared that if humanity developed these principles further, you might become resistant to harvesting, or worse, become a threat to them. Which is exactly what happened when the deterrent engaged their patrol ships, Commander Taylor realized. Indeed, your single ship demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible for your technological level. You proved their fears were justified. Sarah stood, pacing the platform as she processed everything. So what happens now? You've helped us destroy one progenitor base, but you said they've been at this for 1,000,000 years. How many more are out there? Vashti and the other council members exchanged looks. Many. Too many for our forces to engage directly. That is why we need humanity's help. Our help? Sarah was skeptical. Your technology is clearly centuries beyond ours. What could we possibly offer? Something unique, Elder Kizit responded. Of all the species the progenitors have created, humans have shown the fastest natural development of quantum consciousness potential. Your minds are evolving at a rate we've never seen before. More importantly, Vashti added, your gravitational lance technology represents a new approach to manipulating the same energies the progenitors harvest. Combined with our knowledge, it could be developed into a weapon capable of severing their connection to the harvested energies that power their civilization. The implications were staggering. Sarah looked at Dr. Rivera, who nodded slowly, already seeing the theoretical possibilities. You're proposing an alliance. Sarah concluded. We are proposing to make humanity the vanguard of a rebellion that has been brewing for millennia. With your technology and our resources, we can finally strike at the heart of the progenitor empire. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. A communication officer of Vashti's species rushed in, reporting urgently in their native language. Vashti turned to the humans, their composure slipping for the first time. We have a problem. A progenitor dreadnought has just appeared at the edge of this system, one far larger than any we've encountered before. The holographic display shifted to show a massive vessel approaching, a ship that made even the deterrent look tiny by comparison. How? Sarah demanded. How did they find us so quickly? Vashti's expression darkened. They shouldn't have been able to. Unless. Dr. Rivera's eyes widened suddenly. The lance. When we fired it at their patrol ships, could they have been able to track the quantum signature somehow? Possibly, Elder Kizit acknowledged. But a response this rapid suggests something more. Something we hadn't considered. Sarah felt cold dread building as a new transmission cut through the alarms. A familiar voice filled the chamber. Admiral Vanish of the progenitor fleet. But this time, there was something different about it. Something that sent chills down her spine. Reclamation Collective. We know you harbor the Earth vessel. Surrender it immediately, or face extinction. One of the security officers from the deterrent stepped forward suddenly, his movement oddly mechanical. Before anyone could react, he raised a device that none of them had noticed during the security screening. That won't be necessary, Admiral, he said in a voice that was his, but somehow not his. I have visual confirmation of both targets. Sarah's hand went to her sidearm, but the officer was faster, activating the device. A pulse of energy erupted outward, temporarily disabling the sanctuary's internal systems. As the lights flickered and stabilized, Sarah found herself staring at her security officer, whose features were now shifting, melting like wax to reveal something else beneath, something that looked almost human, but wrong in subtle, disturbing ways. Infiltrator. Vashti shouted as their security forces rushed forward. The disguised progenitor agent smiled, its face now fully transformed into its true appearance. Humanoid, but with that same artificial sheen they had seen on the clone soldiers, its features too perfect, too symmetrical to be natural. Too late, it said calmly. The quantum beacon is active. The harbinger approaches. It turned its gaze directly to Sarah. Did you really think you were the first humans to reach the stars, Captain Chen? Your species has been under our guidance for far longer than you know. As chaos erupted in the chamber, Sarah realized the horrifying truth. The progenitors hadn't just been watching humanity from afar. They had been among us all along. And now, both humanity's greatest weapon and their potential allies were trapped, facing a force beyond anything they had prepared for. But as she looked around at her team, at the council members rallying their forces, at the determination in the eyes of beings from across the galaxy who had all defied their intended fate, Sarah felt something beyond fear, something that the progenitors, for all their power and ancient knowledge, had never anticipated and could never harvest. Hope. All deterrent personnel, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Return to the ship and prepare for immediate launch. Dr. Rivera, work with their scientists. I want that theoretical weapon ready to test in hours, not days. She turned to Vashti. We didn't come this far to surrender. If the progenitors want to fight, then humanity will show them exactly what we're capable of when pushed too far. As the massive progenitor dreadnought loomed closer, a new chapter in the galactic conflict was about to begin. One where humanity would no longer be merely an experiment or a resource to be harvested, but a force that would change the balance of power forever. The galaxy was about were the ones they feared most. The battle that followed would later be known as the turning point, the moment when the vast, ancient empire of the progenitors first faced a challenge they could neither predict nor control. The deterrent broke away from the sanctuary as the massive progenitor dreadnought, designation Harbinger, moved into attack position. Sanctuary's defensive systems activated, creating a shimmering barrier around the structure, but everyone knew it wouldn't hold for long against the Harbinger's weapons. Status report, Sarah ordered as she returned to the deterrence bridge, her mind racing through possibilities. All crew accounted for except the infiltrator, Commander Taylor reported. The sanctuary is transmitting tactical data about the Harbinger's capabilities. It's concerning, Captain. The view screen showed details of the enemy vessel, a ship 5 times the size of the deterrent, with weapons systems that could reduce entire planets to molten slag. What about Dr. Rivera and the reclamation scientists? They're working on adapting the gravitational lance based on the theoretical research, but they need time. Time they didn't have. The Harbinger opened fire, massive energy beams striking the sanctuary's shields. The entire structure shuddered, sections of the shield flickering dangerously. Sarah made her decision. We need to draw their attention away from the sanctuary. Navigation, plot an attack course. We're going to give Dr. Rivera the time he needs. Captain, Walsh objected. The Harbinger outclasses us in every category. We wouldn't last 5 minutes in direct engagement. We don't need to win, Commander. We just need to be annoying enough that they can't ignore us. She turned to communications. Open a channel to Vashti. The alien leader's face appeared on screen, their expression tense but controlled. Captain Chen, our shields cannot withstand sustained bombardment from a vessel of this class. I know. The deterrent will engage and draw their fire. Just keep your scientists working with Dr. Rivera. Vashti's black eyes widened slightly. That would be a suicide mission. Maybe. But sometimes the best way to survive is to do something so crazy that no one sees it coming. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Humanity has a talent for that. Before Vashti could protest further, Sarah cut the transmission. All hands to battle stations. Weapons, target their sensor arrays. Let's give them something to worry about besides the sanctuary. The deterrent surged forward. Its engines pushed beyond recommended limits. As they approached the massive dreadnought, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. This was what the deterrent had been built for, not just to defend Earth, but to stand against impossible odds when retreat wasn't an option. Gravitational lance charged to 60%, the weapons officer reported. Fire as soon as we're in range. Aim for their primary sensor cluster. The lance discharge, the beam of concentrated gravitational energy striking the dreadnought's forward section. Unlike the patrol ships they had faced earlier, the Harbinger's shields held, but not without cost. The energy discharge created visible ripples across the shield barrier, and the massive ship adjusted its position, turning its attention away from the sanctuary and toward the much smaller human vessel. "We have their attention," Taylor confirmed grimly. "Evasive maneuvers. Keep moving. Don't give them a static target." What followed was less a battle than an elaborate dance of survival. The deterrent swooped and twisted through space, using its smaller size and superior maneuverability to avoid the worst of the Harbinger's attacks. Each time the lance recharged, they struck again, not doing significant damage, but forcing the enemy to continually adjust their shields and targeting systems. Minutes stretched into an hour, and the deterrent began to show the strain. Hull breaches on 3 decks, power fluctuations throughout the ship, and a gravitational lance operating at reduced efficiency after repeated firings. "Captain," communications called out. "Message from Dr. Rivera. Sarah." Clearly, despite the background noise of what sounded like frantic activity. "Captain, we've done it. The reclamation scientists helped us reconfigure the lance to target the specific quantum frequency the progenitors use to harvest and channel consciousness energy. In English, Doctor, we can hit them where it really hurts, their power source. But we need to get close, really close, and we need the sanctuary to fire their weapons simultaneously. The combined effect should create a resonance cascade that will disrupt their entire energy network." Sarah exchanged glances with Commander Taylor. "How close is really close, Doctor?" A hesitation. "Point-blank range, Captain. Essentially, we need to ram them." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. "Can the modifications be transferred to the sanctuary's weapons?" Sarah asked. "No. Their systems aren't compatible with the specific gravitational mechanics of the lance. It has to be the deterrent." Sarah nodded slowly. "Understood. Start the modifications. We'll get you your shot." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "I need volunteers to stay aboard. The rest will evacuate to the sanctuary via escape pods." Not a single officer moved from their station. "With respect, Captain," Commander Taylor said quietly, "we all knew the risks when we signed up for this mission." Walsh nodded agreement. "Earth needs to know what we've learned. Some of us should go back to report, but the deterrent needs her crew for this final run." Sarah felt a swell of pride, so intense it was almost painful. "Navigation, plot a direct course for the Harbinger's command center. Weapons, pour everything we have into their forward shields to weaken them for the lance. Engineering, I need maximum power to the engines for one final push." As the crew prepared for their final attack run, Sarah opened a channel to Vashti. "We're making our move. Be ready to extract whatever data you can when the disruption hits." The alien leader's expression was solemn. "Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, Captain Chen. When this is over, if your ship is lost, I give you my word that the reclamation will ensure Earth receives everything we know about the progenitors. And will you help them prepare? They'll need allies in what's coming. We will do more than that. We will stand with humanity as equals in the struggle against our common enemy. Your people have proven themselves worthy inheritors of the galaxy." Sarah nodded, then closed the channel. She returned to her captain's chair, watching as the massive form of the Harbinger grew larger on the view screen. "Lance modifications complete," engineering reported. "The weapon is charging with the new configuration. Time to impact." 3 minutes, Captain." Sarah opened a ship-wide channel. "This is your captain speaking. In 3 minutes, we will engage the enemy at point-blank range. Our mission is to disrupt their power network, giving the Sanctuary and the rest of the Reclamation Fleet a chance to strike decisively." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I could tell you that what we're about to do is for Earth, for humanity's survival. And it is. But it's also for every species that has been treated as nothing more than a resource by the progenitors. It's for the right of all intelligent life to determine its own destiny." The deterrent accelerated, pushing toward the Harbinger even as the massive dreadnought fired again and again, each blast taking a greater toll on the battleship's failing shields and hull. Whatever happens next, Remember this. When humanity's battleship arrived, the galaxy learned that we would not go quietly. We would not be harvested. We would fight, not just for ourselves, but for something larger, the freedom of all sentient beings to exist on their own terms. The deterrent shuddered violently as a direct hit breached the hull on Deck 12. Emergency force fields activated, preventing catastrophic decompression. On minute to impact, navigation announced, voice steady despite everything. Lance charged to maximum with new parameters, weapons reported. On the view screen, the Harbinger loomed Burrage. Sarah gripped the arms of her captain's chair. Sanctuary reports ready, Captain. Their systems are aligned to capitalize on the disruption we create. 30 seconds. Sarah stood, facing the view screen and the enemy that had threatened not just Earth, but countless worlds across the galaxy. Fire everything we have at their forward shields. Clear us a path. The deterrent's conventional weapons, missile banks, plasma cannons, rail guns, all fired simultaneously, concentrating on a single point in the Harbinger's defensive screen. A visible fluctuation appeared in the shield barrier, a momentary weakness. 10 seconds. Prepare to fire the lance on my mark. The bridge crew braced for impact as the deterrent hurtled toward the dreadnought at full speed, aimed directly at the fluctuating section of shield. Mark. The gravitational lance fired, its beam striking the weakened shield precisely at the moment of impact. For a heartbeat, nothing seemed to happen, and then the bridge was filled with blinding light as reality itself seemed to distort around them. Sarah felt a strange sensation, as if her consciousness was simultaneously expanding and contracting. Around her, the crew experienced the same effect, their perceptions momentarily transcending the physical confines of the ship. In that moment of quantum resonance, Sarah understood what the progenitors had been harvesting all these millennia: the unique ability of conscious minds to perceive and potentially influence the underlying fabric of reality itself. The Harbinger's shields collapsed completely as the Lance's modified energy disrupted the quantum network that powered their systems. The deterrent's momentum carried it through, the battleship plowing into the dreadnought's hull even as secondary explosions began to chain through both vessels. Direct hit. Someone shouted through the chaos. The Lance effect is spreading through their systems. From the sanctuary, Vashti and the Council watched in awe as a visible wave of energy radiated outward from the point of impact, spreading across the Harbinger's massive form. Systems failed in its wake, weapons ports going dark, engines sputtering and dying. And then something unexpected happened. As the quantum disruption reached the Harbinger's core, it triggered a reaction that no one, not the reclamation scientists, not Dr. Rivera, not even the progenitors themselves, had anticipated. The consciousness energy that had been harvested and stored within the ship's systems was suddenly released, free from the constraints that had contained it. And it reached out, seeking connection with the minds that had set it free. On the deterrent's bridge, as emergency systems failed and structural integrity collapsed, Sarah Chen and her crew experienced something beyond physical sensation, a merging of consciousness with countless others, the minds of species long harvested reaching out in gratitude and purpose. When Sarah opened her eyes again, she was still on the bridge, but the destruction had paused, suspended in a moment between moments. Before her stood a figure composed of light, vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting, as if unable to settle on a single form. Captain Chen. It spoke, not with sound but directly into her mind. You have done what we could not. You have broken the cycle. Who are you? She asked, though she somehow already knew the answer. We are the accumulated consciousness of those harvested by the progenitors over millennia. Preserved, utilized, but never truly destroyed. And now, thanks to the disruption you created, we are free. The ship is breaking apart. My crew. Your physical forms are in peril, yes. But we can help. The quantum energy released by the Lance's interaction with the Harbinger's core has created a temporary bridge between states of existence. We can guide you through it." Before Sarah could respond, the figure gestured, and the bridge around them dissolved into patterns of light and energy. She felt herself being carried along a current of consciousness, her mind expanding to encompass perspectives and experiences from 1,000 different species. And then, abruptly, she was council chamber, surrounded by her equally disoriented crew. Around them, the reclamation leaders stared in shock. "How?" Vashti began. "Captain," Dr. Rivera interrupted, checking readings on a device the reclamation scientists had given him. "The quantum disruption, it didn't just disable the Harbinger. It's spreading through what appears to be a subspace network, affecting progenitor systems across this entire sector." Outside, through the sanctuary's observation ports, they could see the Harbinger drifting. Its systems dark, the deterrence remains embedded in its hull like a splinter in the flesh of a giant. But more significantly, they could see pulses of energy racing outward in all directions along invisible pathways. The quantum network that connected the progenitor empire now becoming the conduit for its undoing. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the EA's Prometheus, Earth's newest battleship, built with a combination of human innovation and reclamation technology. Beside her, Vashti watched as a joint fleet of human and reclamation vessels conducted training maneuvers in the shadow of Jupiter. "The progenitors have withdrawn from 3 more sectors," the alien leader informed her. "Our intelligence suggests they're consolidating their forces around their core worlds." Buying time to adapt to the quantum disruption technology, Sarah nodded. "We need to press our advantage while we can." Agreed. The Council has approved the expansion of the Alliance. 6 more liberated species have joined our cause. Vashti turned to face her directly. None of this would have been possible without the deterrent and its crew. Sarah thought of her ship, now a memorial and a symbol. Parts of it had been salvaged, studied, and incorporated into the new vessels being constructed in shipyards throughout the solar system. Earth had transformed in the months since they had returned with the truth about the galaxy and humanity's place in it. Fear had given way to determination. Old conflicts between nations had faded in importance compared to the existential threat and opportunity that the stars now represented, and the unique property of human consciousness that the progenitors had feared was being studied, developed, and integrated into new technologies and understanding. "We were lucky," Sarah said modestly. "No," Vashti corrected. "You were human. Your species' greatest strength isn't your technology or even your potential for quantum consciousness manipulation. It's your adaptability, your capacity to face impossible odds and still find a way forward." Below them, on the command deck of the Prometheus, Dr. Rivera and a team of human and alien scientists monitored the first test of the ship's improved gravitational lance, now enhanced with the quantum resonance technology that had been so effective against the Harbinger. "The war is far from over," Sarah acknowledged. "The progenitors have been farming species for 1,000,000 years. They won't give up their harvest easily. No, but for the first time, they face opposition they cannot simply eliminate or control. And that gives hope to every world they've seeded, every species they've planned to harvest." A notification chimed softly. Admiral Harrison, now head of Earth's new interstellar defense force, was requesting their presence at a strategy meeting. The combined intelligence assets of Earth and the Reclamation had identified what appeared to be a major progenitor staging area just beyond the Orion Arm. As they turned to leave the observation deck, Sarah paused for one last look at the fleet and the gas giant beyond. From Earth, Jupiter had always been just a bright point in the night sky, a reminder of how vast and mysterious the cosmos was. Now it represented something else, a stepping stone on humanity's journey into a galaxy far more complex, dangerous, and wondrous than anyone had imagined. The progenitors had created humanity as a carefully controlled experiment, meant to be harvested like all the others. Instead, they had inadvertently forged the key to their own undoing. Because when humanity's battleship had arrived on the galactic stage, it had brought something the ancient empire had never anticipated. Not just the will to survive, but the determination to ensure that no intelligence, anywhere, would ever be treated as a mere resource again. And that was something truly worthy of fear. Sarah smiled and turned away from the viewport. There was work to be done, a rebellion to lead, and a future to forge among the stars, not just for humanity, but for all the